My name is Isabel A. Gullo, and I am 34 years old. My parents laughed while I lived homeless in a camper, then tried to steal the house I bought for my golden child sister and her husband. So I called the cops, exposed them publicly, and destroyed the reputation they had spent years pretending was flawless. I want to be clear about something before I start. I was never the family screw-up. I was never the broke one, the irresponsible one, or the daughter who needed saving. For most of my adult life, I was the opposite of that. I had an apartment I paid for on time every month. I had a truck I owned outright. I had a career niche enough to feel recession-resistant, or so I believed. I did acoustic consultation, soundproofing assessments, noise ordinance compliance reviews for construction firms, and environmental sound mapping for commercial developers. Not glamorous, not easy to explain at family dinners, but it paid well and the demand was consistent. Builders needed me before permits were approved. That was a solid position to be in. Then the pandemic hit. Every construction project in my pipeline froze at once. Not slowed down, frozen. Developers pulled funding. Firms furloughed departments overnight. My specific work required being physically present at properties, measuring sound, walking sites, mapping conditions. Remote work was not an option for the core contracts that paid my bills. Within 60 days, I went from fully booked to completely dry. I burned through my savings carefully, strategically, trying to wait it out. Month 4, nothing moved. Month 5, I was behind on rent. Month 6, my landlord and I had a conversation that ended with him looking at me like I had become a problem instead of a tenant. By month 7, I was living out of my truck with a rusted camper attached to the hitch. Here is what I want you to understand. I was not spiraling. I was not collapsing. I was calculating. I had maybe 4 months of runway left if I kept expenses near zero. What I needed was a bridge. A roof for 90 days while the industry thawed and I restructured. So I called my parents. Dwight and Norma owned their home outright. 4 bedrooms. My old room still sitting empty with a guest bed in it. My father was a retired city inspector. My mother worked part-time as a bookkeeper. I laid everything out plainly. No dramatics. No begging. Pandemic, contracts gone, savings depleted, need a room for 2 or 3 months. That was it. My dad laughed. Not a cruel laugh at first. More like he genuinely could not process what he was hearing. Then my mother said, "We're not running a shelter, Isabel." And just like that, the conversation was over. I sat with that for 10 minutes. Then I called Maddie. My younger sister Maddie was the golden child in every family dynamic that has ever existed. She was married to Brian, who ran an event catering operation out of a leased commercial kitchen. They had 2 kids. Family photos every weekend. Matching outfits at holidays. The kind of life my parents could brag about without explaining anything. Maddie performed the role of perfect daughter so completely that Dwight and Norma had long ago confused approval with love. I explained my situation the same way I had explained it to my parents. Clean. Factual. No begging. Maddie called me a homeless parasite. There was a pause. Then Brian got on the line. She had put me on speaker, which told me everything I needed to know about that household. In a light, amused voice, he asked whether I was planning on cooking meth in parking lots next. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I said, "Okay, got it." Then I ended the call. That was the last time I asked anyone in my family for a single thing. I sat in the driver's seat of my truck, in a gas station parking lot off the interstate, camper behind me, $6,200 left in my account, and made a decision. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet, cold, and completely clear. I was going to disappear. I was going to work until I bled. I was going to save every dollar I touched. And when I came back, not if, when none of them were going to be ready for what I had built, I started the engine, pulled onto the highway, and did not look back once. The next 2 years were going to change everything. I just did not know yet how much they were going to change for them. The first thing you learn when you live out of a camper is that comfort is a habit, not a requirement. You miss it for about 2 weeks. The hot shower whenever you want it. The ability to stand upright inside your own space. The silence that does not have a diesel engine idling 40 feet away. Then your brain recalibrates. It separates what is necessary from what you were only used to, and everything non-essential gets filed under survive first, mourn later. That recalibration saved me. Once I stopped grieving the life I had lost, I had space to focus on what I was building. I found a 24-hour gym 11 minutes from the industrial park, where I parked most nights. $12 a month. That was my shower, my locker, my morning reset. I ate one proper meal a day and snacked on cheap things that did not require refrigeration. I tracked every dollar in a notebook, not an app, because physically writing down where your money goes makes every purchase feel like testimony. Work came back in pieces. Acoustic consulting shifted partially remote during the pandemic. Not site assessments, but compliance reporting, permit support, documentation reviews. I rebuilt my client list from nothing, taking digital assessment work from firms that needed paperwork cleared before inspections resumed. It was not full income, but it was income. On weekends, I helped a licensed inspector named Ord with building review jobs. He paid cash and never asked too many questions about why I was always available. By month 8 of ghost mode, I had 2 income streams. By month 12, I had 3. I opened a high-yield savings account and set up automatic transfers the day every payment cleared. I did not touch that account. Not once. It was untouchable by rule. My rule. The only rule that mattered. I stayed off social media under my real name. But I kept a burner account because I am human. And I wanted to know what was being said. What I found over those 2 years was not surprising. It was clarifying. Maddie posted constantly. Family photos, weekend trips, her kids in matching clothes, Sunday dinners with my parents. Brian's catering business had polished photos of grazing tables and wedding buffets. My parents took a beach vacation with Maddie's family, all of them sunburned and laughing in front of a rented house by the water. I was sleeping in a parking lot off Route 9 when those photos went up. I looked at them for 30 seconds, closed the tab, and transferred another $400 to the untouchable account. The one real contact I maintained was my cousin Petra. She was in her early 40s, a retired nurse, and the only person in the family who usually said what was true instead of what was comfortable. 6 months into my disappearance, she found my real profile and messaged me. "They talk about you like you're already gone." I never agreed with any of it. "I just want you to know that," I replied. We kept it quiet. She became my only window into the family without them knowing I was watching. 18 months in, I had enough for a down payment. By month 20, I had enough to move without needing much of one. A small personal loan bridged the gap, and I closed that loan out 31 days after purchase. The house was a 3-bedroom on a half-acre in a stable suburb. Private lot, detached garage, paid for and titled in my name alone. No cosigners, no family, nobody's name but mine. I told one person, "Petra, that was my mistake." Not because Petra betrayed me. She did not. She mentioned it once, casually, at a family dinner she thought was safe. 3 words. Isabel bought a house. I found out 48 hours later when my phone rang and Norma's name appeared on the screen. Her voice was warm in a way it had never been in my entire life. "Isabel, sweetheart, we heard the news. We'd love to come see it this weekend." Sweetheart. She called me sweetheart. I knew exactly what that warmth meant, and I started getting ready. I had 4 days before the weekend. I used 2 of them to research single-party consent recording laws in my state. One person in a conversation could legally record without informing the others, as long as that person was present. I read multiple sources to make sure I was not misunderstanding. I was not. I used the other 2 days to set up. My phone on continuous audio record, screen off, tucked between 2 cookbooks on a kitchen shelf angled toward the living room. My old tablet, factory reset, and running a recording app, placed in the hallway bathroom, with the door cracked open. Backup. I did test runs, walking through the house at normal volume, then playing back the files. Clear. Every word. I was not angry that Saturday. Anger is loud. Anger makes mistakes. What I felt was colder and far more useful. I felt ready. They arrived in 2 waves. Dwight and Norma first, bringing a grocery store cake in a plastic container, white frosting with blue trim, the kind bought in 7 minutes when someone needs to appear thoughtful. Norma hugged me at the door. Actually hugged me. Dwight shook my hand and said the house looked solid, which from him was almost a blessing. Maddie and Brian arrived 20 minutes later in their leased SUV, the kids racing toward the yard like they already owned it. Brian air-kissed near my cheek and called the house charming. Maddie clapped my shoulder and said, "Look at you! Look at you!" I smiled, offered coffee, and gave the tour they clearly wanted. The first hour was performance. Theirs enthusiastic, mine neutral. Brian opened closet doors, checked window sizes, and ran his hand across the kitchen counter. Maddie asked about the garage twice. Dwight asked about lot boundaries. Norma called the main bedroom spacious in a tone that sounded almost wistful. After lunch, sandwiches I made because I refused to let the visit cost me more than necessary. Maddie set down her drink and shifted into a different voice. She was worried about me, she said, rattling around in a 3-bedroom alone. It was a lot of house for one person. She and Brian had been struggling with their rental. Landlord problems. Lease complications. The kids needed outdoor space. "So you're looking to rent from me?" I asked. Maddie shook her head. "Not rent. Live together. As family. Temporary," she said. "Maybe a year. Maybe 18 months. Then Brian leaned forward, calm as still water. "Honestly, Isabel, you're used to the camper lifestyle now. It might suit you better while we get settled. You'd basically be freeing up space you don't really need." I looked at him, then at Maddie, then at my parents, both studying the table. "And you think that's reasonable?" Norma said. "It's practical, given that Maddie has the children." Dwight nodded once. I nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." When they left, I played back the recordings. Crystal clear, every word. Then I checked my missed calls. "Unknown number," I called it back. A cheerful man answered, "Hi, calling to confirm your Thursday booking. Moving truck for 8 a.m. Then he read off my address. My address. I had not booked any moving truck. "Name on the account?" I asked. He said Maddie's full name without hesitation. I hung up and sat still for a full minute. They had not planned this after the visit. They had planned it before. The visit was only the courtesy performance before the theft. I spent the rest of that evening and the next 2 days moving carefully. The first thing I did was call a real estate attorney on Monday morning. I did not tell him a dramatic story. I gave him facts. I owned the house. The title was in my name alone. No lease existed. No verbal agreement had been made. Someone had booked a moving truck to my address without my permission, and I believed they might attempt to occupy the property. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "If they enter without authorization, it is trespassing. If they present a fake lease, that becomes document fraud. Keep proof of ownership on you. Do not physically engage. Call law enforcement." I wrote every word down. On Wednesday night, I made a deliberate choice. I parked my truck 2 blocks away and walked to a diner for dinner. I wanted the house to look quiet, empty, undisturbed. I wanted them to feel confident enough to do what they had already planned. Thursday morning, I woke before 6. At 6:45, I drove past my own street slowly enough to check without stopping. No moving truck yet. I parked 3 blocks away and waited. At 7:52, I saw a large moving truck turn onto my street from the reflection in a parked van's side mirror. I gave it 15 minutes, then I drove past again. The truck was in my driveway. My front door was open. And even from the street, I could see the lock hardware, my lock hardware, lying in a pile on the front step. They had drilled it out. They brought a locksmith at 7 in the morning to drill into my house before the movers even started unloading. I pulled over and took photos. Then video. Slow pan. Timestamp visible. Moving truck. Open door. Destroyed lock hardware. Maddie's SUV parked halfway on the lawn. I got everything I needed in less than 2 minutes. Then I drove around the corner and made 2 calls. The first was to the non-emergency police line. I kept my voice calm. I gave my name, my address, and explained that I was the deed-holding owner of a property currently being occupied without authorization. I told them the locks had been tampered with and that I had photographic evidence. The dispatcher said officers would respond. The second was a group text. Every family contact I still had. Dwight, Norma, aunts, uncles, cousins. Family friends my parents had known for 20 years. Petra got a separate message. Come to the house. Bring whoever you trust. I need real witnesses. The group text said, something is happening at my house right now. If you want to understand what this family is actually made of, come to the address below. You'll want to be here in person. Then I drove back. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, 2 patrol cars were already angling in behind me. 4 officers stepped out. I got out with my deed, purchase agreement, and ID already in hand. I presented everything before anyone asked. One officer, older and methodical, reviewed the papers, looked at the drilled lock hardware, then told everyone to hold position. Maddie came outside. She had heard the cars. Her face moved through confusion, recognition, calculation, and then injured innocence so quickly it would have been impressive if it were not happening on my lawn. Behind her, relatives were already arriving. 6 cars, then 7, then 8. Petra was third in line. My parents appeared near the curb, Dwight looking down, Norma clasping her hands in front of her like she was preparing to pray in public. Maddie looked at the officers, then at the crowd, then at me, and she reached into her jacket and pulled out folded papers. She agreed to rent to us, Maddie said. That's a signed lease, her signature. The officer took the papers. He looked them over, then turned toward me. From inside the house, Brian's voice cut through the doorway, sharp and panicked, calling Maddie's name in a tone that told me this was not going according to plan. The officer held the lease out. Ma'am, is this your signature? I looked at it. Clean forgery. Close, but wrong. The pen pressure was too heavy, and the date was 3 months before I even closed on the property. I looked at Maddie. She was sweating. I let the silence sit for a few extra seconds. She had spent 2 years calling me a parasite. She had spent the last week preparing to steal my house with a fake document. She deserved those seconds. Then I said, no, that is not my signature. And that date is 3 months before I closed on this property. I can provide the closing documents right now. The officer looked again. The discrepancy was not subtle once it was named. That was when Maddie pivoted. The lease was failing, so she went straight to emotion. She said I had verbally agreed. She said the paperwork was just a formality. She said I changed my mind out of spite and was now trying to remove her children from a home they had been invited into. Brian came outside and joined her, arms crossed, face arranged into wounded dignity. I don't understand why this is being treated like a criminal matter, he said. This is clearly a family misunderstanding. Aunt Rowena stood at the front of the relative cluster, watching silently. I let the performance run. Then I raised one hand and said loudly enough for the entire driveway to hear, before anyone decides what the truth is, I need everyone to listen to something. I pulled out my phone and hit play. 11 minutes and 14 seconds of audio filled the driveway. Maddie's voice, calm and reasonable, laying out the plan. Brian's voice suggesting I returned to camper life because I was used to it. Norma saying it was practical because Maddie had children. Dwight's silence. Present and damning. Nobody spoke. Not the officers. Not the relatives. Not Maddie. When the recording ended, I put my phone back in my pocket. Maddie whispered, "You recorded us." "In my own house," I said. Single-party consent. Look it up. After that, everything broke open. Rowena went straight at Dwight, asking what kind of father let one daughter sleep in a camper and then helped another daughter steal her house. One cousin told Brian exactly what she thought of his camper comment. Norma cried and tried to explain, but nobody wanted to listen. The officers instructed Maddie, Brian, and the movers to remove every item from the property. The locksmith was called back at Maddie's expense. The fake lease was photographed and retained. A detective handed me his card and said someone would follow up regarding possible fraud charges. I stood at my front door and watched every box leave, watched the moving truck reverse out of my driveway, watched Maddie's SUV follow it down the street without her looking back once. When the last car was gone, I went inside, sat at my kitchen table, and wrote everything down while it was fresh. Every detail, every quote, every expression I could remember. Then I uploaded the audio, the photos of the drilled locks, the image of the fake lease with personal information removed, and the written account to a public forum. I did not use names. I did not need to. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Maddie. 4 words. "You have no idea." I put the phone face down, closed my eyes, and slept harder than I had in 2 years. Maddie was right, actually. I had no idea. Not the full picture. Not then. What came after that night was bigger, messier, and more complete than anything I had planned for, and I say that as someone who had planned for quite a bit. 3 weeks after the driveway incident, a detective contacted me. The forged lease had been reviewed by their fraud unit. The notary stamp referenced a commission number belonging to a notary whose certification had lapsed 14 months earlier. That meant someone had lifted old stamp information and used it fraudulently on a document they had manufactured themselves. Combined with the forged signature and the drilled lock hardware, Maddie and Brian were looking at criminal trespassing and document fraud charges. Not harmless family drama. Not a misunderstanding. Not siblings working things out. Real charges, the kind that require an attorney. They hired one immediately. I knew because Petra told me, and Petra knew because Norma called her crying about legal fees. The retainer alone was apparently enough to drain what little buffer Maddie and Brian still had left. That did not surprise me. Their life had always looked expensive from the outside. Leased SUV. Polished birthday parties. Matching vacation clothes. Catered holiday photos that made struggle look impossible. But underneath all that shine, the accounts had been quietly bleeding for nearly 2 years. The public post I uploaded spread faster than I expected. I had not tagged anyone. I had not used names. I had not written it like revenge. I simply told the truth in order and attached proof. The audio, the photos of the drilled locks, the fake lease with personal information removed, and my written timeline. But the local forum had a strong community readership, and Brian's catering business had a recognizable local presence. People connected the dots without my help. Within 6 weeks, his remaining bookings canceled. A vendor he had owed money to for nearly a year saw the post, recognized the pattern, and made his own public statement. Other people started talking, quietly at first, then loudly. Clients who had felt pressured, vendors who had waited too long for payment, friends who had noticed the perfect family image cracking at the edges. Brian's business page went quiet. Then it disappeared entirely. I did not touch any of that. I watched from a distance, silently, the same way they had watched me live in a camper, and laughed. The part I did not see coming was Maddie. 2 months after the driveway, Petra called me on a Tuesday evening. She had that careful voice she used when something mattered. During the chaos of the legal situation, while documents were being gathered and phones were being reviewed by their attorney, Maddie got into Brian's phone. She found a message thread with a woman who worked as a supplier for his catering business. Months long, detailed enough that nobody could call it friendly. The affair had been going on for at least a year, possibly longer. Maddie filed for divorce within the month. I sat with that information for a while after Petra hung up. I did not feel satisfaction. Not exactly. It felt more like watching a structure finally settle into the shape it had always been moving toward. The catering business, the leased SUV, the perfect family photos, the march into my home with a forged lease, all of it had been held together by image management and mutual pretending. Once the image cracked, there was nothing solid underneath. Maddie moved back into Dwight and Norma's house. The golden child, back in her childhood bedroom, facing fraud charges in the middle of a divorce. I do not say that with pleasure. I say it because it happened. My parents sent a letter about 6 weeks later, carefully worded, full of soft phrases like, "We should have done better," and "We hope you can understand." I read it once, set it on the kitchen counter, and left it there for 3 days. Then I filed it in a drawer and did not respond. They showed up at the house on a Saturday morning. I answered the door. Norma started talking first, trembling, explaining, circling the apology without ever landing on it. Dwight stood behind her, smaller than I remembered, eyes fixed somewhere near my shoulder. I listened for exactly 2 minutes. Then I said, "I don't need an explanation. I needed parents. That window is closed." I closed the door. Not hard. Just shut. Aunt Rowena called that evening to check on me. That meant more than the letter ever could have. Petra came over the next week with soup and a bottle of wine, and we ate at my kitchen table while the house settled into dusk around us. For the first time, the place felt fully mine. Not just because the deed said so, but because I had defended it. The fraud case resolved 4 months later through a plea agreement. Community service. Restitution for the lock damage. A formal fraud notation attached to Brian's business record. No prison time. But the paper trail exists permanently, and in industries where reputation functions as currency, permanent paper trails do quiet work over time. I am sitting on my porch as I write this final update. Coffee beside me. Half-acre lot in front of me. Detached garage behind me where I rebuilt my acoustic consulting practice. 3 steady clients. 2 more in conversation. Growth at a pace I can manage without breaking myself again. People keep asking whether I regret it. The recording. The public post. The closed door. No, not one piece of it. Here is the thing about being written off completely by the people who were supposed to stand in your corner. It clarifies everything. It strips away every relationship that was conditional and leaves only what is real. Petra is real. Rowena is real. The work I did in parking lots at 2 a.m. to build something nobody could take from me is real. Everything else was just noise I had been too close to hear correctly. People show you who they are when they think you are done. The trick is to let them think that long enough to get it all on record. I meant every word. I still do.